Georgia, Georgia.
The state of Georgia holds a special historical place in the development of the United States as one of the most definitive regions to espouse the virtue of peace. The arrival of General James Oglethorpe in 1733, which began the British colonization of the Georgia Territory, could very well have resulted in massacres and misfortune. Instead, the peaceful embrace of Oglethorpe by Tomochichi, chief of the Yamacraw tribe, established a tradition that prevails in Georgia to the present day. Despite a great age difference between the two men, it was assumed that Tomochichi was in his late 80s when Oglethorpe arrived. They became the closest of friends, initiating from the moment of Georgia's founding a practice of diplomatic negotiation and cohabitation. As a result, the 18th century Georgia trustees regarded both Chief Tomochichi and General Oglethorpe as the original co-founders of the newly established British colony. In this famous painting by Verelst, James Oglethorpe, who brought Tomochichi and his nobles to London, is seen in the center, in black, pointing to a Bible held by the child Tunahawi, heir to the Yamacraw. Tomochichi on the right holds out his hand to his heir. Tunahawi is reciting the Lord's Prayer in flawless English, moving the king's brother, the Duke of Cumberland, dressed in red. Nearly 3 centuries later, Georgia's tradition of peaceful coexistence continues to thrive. Today, Georgia is considered to be the birthplace and the center of the civil rights movement. With a new museum dedicated to the global aspiration of human and civil rights currently underway, the wisdom of peacemakers like Tomochichi, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Atlanta's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be made accessible to the world. A pedestrian connection will lead from Centennial Olympic Park, where the museum will be located, through the World Congress Center Plaza to the new proposed restoration of the 19th century historic Mims Park. The restored park will again contain a commemorative monumental column crowned by Tomochichi. As previously stated, it was Tomochichi who first established our tradition of peace, having chosen to befriend Oglethorpe rather than massacre him and the British colonists. This friendship established native Georgia and British colonial peaceful coexistence, which lasted a century until the unspeakable Trail of Tears removed the native population. In addressing and in answer to this dark chapter in our history, this Trail of Peace will showcase allegorical sculpture and art, vividly portraying the important place native Georgians and 200 years later native Atlantans hold in the historical striving for peace and human rights. Once you have passed through the World Congress Center Plaza, crossing Northside Drive, walking down Boone or Tyler Streets, you enter Vine City and historic Mims Park. Settled in the 19th century by large landowners, Vine City is one of Atlanta's earliest predominantly African-American residential neighborhoods. From the time it was first settled, there were segregated subdivisions, schools, and churches for whites and blacks. Through the years, these different peoples populating the area shaped its unique character and historic importance. One such resident was Edwin Wackendorf, a German immigrant who moved to Atlanta in 1867. He founded Wackendorf Brothers, one of Atlanta's largest plant and flower nurseries, setting up greenhouses and working multiple acres of land, with the main house and other buildings fronting on historic Sunset Avenue. It is from this expansive property that the name Vine City was established. Most of these buildings still stand, and this nursery was 1 block west of historic Mims Park. Originally, Mims Park appeared like this in the late 19th century, looking west toward the Wackendorf Brothers nursery. In the distance, it was bordered by Thurman, Low, Spencer, and Davis Streets, all residential. The Davis Street School was later built in the middle of the park on the rectangular lawn. As the neighborhood grew, so did the Davis Street School, which eventually took over the entire block. Today, the Davis Street School is called Bethune Elementary School. Davis Street is called Northside Drive and is behind the viewer running north. The east side of Northside Drive behind the viewer is now the site of the Georgia World Congress Center and the Georgia Dome. Mims Park was an initiative of Mayor Livingston Mims. Designed in the late 19th century by the firm of Frederick Law Olmsted, arguably the most notable American landscape architect in American history, Mims Park also contained Atlanta's first playground for children. Constructed by order of Mayor Mims, Playground brought together the area's children regardless of race in an attempt to forge bonds for the city's future. The 21st century presents a new opportunity for the recreation of historic Mims Park on the former grounds of the historic Wackendorf Nursery property. The rolling topography allows the original Olmsted plan to be exactly replicated on the new block. The new block is slightly longer, which allows for a farm component to complement the historic park. These are the existing conditions in the early 21st century and are the remnants of the historic Wackendorf farms and a later 20th century community which developed on this farm but was flooded out during construction for the Georgia World Congress Center. Other than its extraordinary historic legacy to the city and the nation, this neighborhood is one of the most strategically located in the capital city. It is bordered on the east by the Georgia Dome, the Georgia World Congress Center, and Georgia State University. On the south, the Atlanta University campuses. On the north, the Coca-Cola Company corporate headquarters and the Georgia Tech campus, and to the west, the Atlanta Beltline. The renaissance of this important district can look like this again. As you enter the park through the farm center and greenhouses below, you are immediately presented with the Peace Column, topped by Chief Tomochichi on the hillside in the distance. As you proceed west through the park, there are a series of commemorations of the city's past among groves, lakes, and gardens. If you look to the north towards the Overlook Plaza, you will see statues of Joseph E. Boone and Dorothy Bolden. Upon reaching Vine Street, a look to the left on the street axis at Thurman Street reveals a statue of Coretta Scott King. And to the right on the Joseph E. Boone Boulevard axis is a statue of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who looks south towards his alma mater, Morehouse, and to his bride. Walking south passing the wading pool, you will see a civic square with a reconstructed Carnegie Library. The original building currently is a construction warehouse on Hollowell Parkway. The recreation of the Carnegie Library in Mims Park is one of the goals of this revitalization. In so doing, it is the hope that the Prince of Wales Foundation will move his foundation for the built environment and sustainability into this historic building. It is also hoped that the revitalization of Vine City will draw on the urban planning of Poundbury, the successful experimental city built by Prince Charles. Behind the proposed Prince of Wales's Foundation building, you see the Peace Pantheon on one of Vine City's highest points, commemorating Georgia peacemakers and all 5 presidents associated with Georgia: Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Jimmy Carter. The Pantheon honors among them 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners, the founder of the League of Nations, 3 presidents who sought peace, the savior of Europe, and her protectors during the 2 world wars. Continuing along the walk, you come across the statue of Booker T. Washington, who faces across the oval his historical counterpart, W.E.B. Du Bois. A noted political leader, educator, and speaker, Booker T. Washington delivered what became known as the Atlanta Compromise speech at the Cotton States Exposition of 1895. Washington offered guidance to both blacks and whites as to how to live together in the new era of emancipation, paving the way for future generations to fight for their civil rights. He believed that African Americans would gain full participation and status in American society by acting responsibly and reliably. Washington became the first principal of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, now known as Tuskegee University. Booker T. Washington and his leading contemporary, W.E.B. Du Bois, maintained a contentious but highly influential dialogue about segregation and how to improve the lives of African Americans. Du Bois believed African Americans should seek higher education and should challenge and question whites on all grounds in order to move up in society. He became the first African American to earn a doctorate at Harvard. Later, he helped organize the Negro exhibition at the 1900 Exposition Universelle in Paris to highlight African Americans' positive contributions to American society. Du Bois helped found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. Continuing uphill to the Peace Column, you will reach at its base a statue of Mayor Livingston Mims, the original park founder. Climbing the staircase to the Peace Column Terrace, the park's highest point, you will discover statues of civil rights leaders including the Honorable Maynard Jackson, visionary leader and mayor of Atlanta who lived on Sunset Avenue and was Atlanta's first black mayor, the Reverend Ralph David Abernathy, the lieutenant of Dr. King, who took over the SCLC after King's assassination, and whose church is on Sunset Avenue. The Honorable Julian Bond, student activist, state legislator, and educator, nominated as Vice President of the United States in his 20s, which he had to decline since the Constitution required he be older, and who also lived on Sunset Avenue. And the Honorable Rodney Mims Cook Sr., alderman and state legislator who voted to seat Bond when he was wrongfully removed from office by an illegal vote of the legislature, and who alone, initially, fought for the removal of the Peyton Road barricade. An elevator ride takes you up 80 feet to the top of the Peace Column, where the nearby Sunset Avenue Historic District is clearly visible. The homes of these civil rights leaders are indicated by bronze plaques, including the Martin Luther King, Maynard Jackson, and Julian Bond families, Reverend Abernathy's church is also identified. A panorama of the city makes the top of the Peace column one of the most beautiful and historic views in the nation. An organic farm within Mims Park would be managed by the residents of the neighborhood. By providing a variety of crops, the farm would bring a much-needed economic engine to the community, allowing those who tend the farm to gain the market benefits of its produce. Today it is inexcusable that this vibrant and important neighborhood has lost its only major park, much less one designed by Olmsted, the prestigious landscape architect most notable for designing the United States Capitol grounds and New York Central Park. It is with this historic park that we will stake our claim to revitalize this important district, not only for the citizens of this city and state, but also for the millions who visit here who will be inspired by those who came before us and changed the world.